Welcome to another edition of the Plan Well podcast, hosted by owner and attorney of Cary Estate Planning, Paul Yokovitis.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode. I believe this is episode 7 of the Plan Well podcast. And today we have my friend Nick, and he is the attorney owner at North State Law in Cary, North Carolina. Nick does primarily administrative law, family law, licensure defense, really helping people out in difficult situations. And he's got somewhat of an interesting history, starting in Florida, doing undergrad at Florida State, moving to Mississippi, and then making his way up to Raleigh, and then recently launching his own law firm last year. So it's been just a little over a year that he's been with North State Law, and he's been excelling in his practice, and glad to have him as a sphere of influence member of ours. Nick, do you want to go ahead and give us a little bit more background and fill any gaps, or give a little bit more context to what I just said?
Yeah, and thank you, Paul, for having me. I really do appreciate the time. So I did start my legal career in Mississippi. I was a public defender, which, if anybody doesn't know, that's you represent folks that can't afford an attorney that are charged with a criminal offense. In my particular situation, I was doing felony work, so I did nothing but felonies. So that was it was an eye-opening experience, and it was a good experience, but it had a lot of difficulty, but I learned a lot, and I'm glad I took that job at the time. So there was a lot of interesting people I represented, and a lot of kind of interesting stories that I ended up getting out of it too. And
I did it's interesting, kind of working for quote unquote the system, because you're sort of, you're given the cases, and then you're immediately met with efficiency issues and funding issues, and trying to get the best outcome for your client, with reality staring you in the face, is you don't have, a well-heeled client that's paying your legal fees. So you don't have, all the resources in the world. I worked at a DA's office my 1L year in law school when I was at Campbell, and it was Wayne County, Goldsboro. And you see it from the other side, which is basically trying to effectuate a efficient volume, basically clearing calendars, not necessarily achieving justice. I know that can be a very emotionally trying situation to be in, because you're sort of forced to do what you're forced to do, instead of trying to be an individual and a personal professional and effectuate the best outcome.
Yeah, the biggest frustration for me is, I was younger and energetic, first attorney job, and I wanted to try every case, regardless of the fact if I had a lot of cases or not. I didn't care. I was single. I had a lot of time on my hands, so that really didn't affect me that much. But every time that I would get to the point where I was trial prepped and ready to go, that Monday morning at court is, hey, your client's been sitting in jail for 9 months. You lost your speedy trial motion. Will he take time served in probation for this, whatever? It's like, I'll talk to him about it. And then it is rinse and repeat. Every single week was like that. And it just got frustrating. So I think that was probably my biggest frustration, to be honest with you.
And so did you segue from that public defender path to North Carolina?
Yeah. So I went moved up here. I lived in Mississippi for 7 years, and I frankly just got tired of living in Mississippi. So
and what part of Mississippi was it?
So I lived in Jackson, where I went to law school, and I lived on the coast for 3 years. So the Gulf Coast, right after Katrina, I guess a couple of years after Katrina had hit, and that place got decimated pretty bad too. So it took me a while to start building back.
And then eventually, I know your wife is originally from North Carolina. You took a little bit of a trip to Raleigh, and then the rest is history, huh?
Oh, yeah, pretty much, man. This is a great place to live. So close to the beach, so close to the mountains. You got a bunch of stuff to do in the Raleigh, Durham area. So it's fantastic, man. Great place to raise a family, and, a lot of outdoor stuff to do, a lot of trails and things like that. So, yeah, it's Absolutely. A fantastic place to live.
So what did you do when you got here from a legal perspective? What sort of focus area were you looking into?
So I actually did some document review for a little while until I got an actual legal job. And then I got it at McWilliam Henderson and Wall, doing family law for them.
Okay.
And went to 2 other firms since then, and then was like, you know what? I think I've learned enough as I possibly could from other people that have law firms. I think I'm going to do this myself. So, and then I did that March of last year, and was like, since I'm going to be doing it myself, I'm going to do an area of law that I feel extremely passionate about, and that was professional license defense, administrative law, that sort of thing. And I'll still do family law because I know how to do it, and there's certain aspects of it where I can really help people.
Mm-hmm.
But my real passion is that professional license defense. I understand why there might be a need for some people to have professional licenses. I mean, if there's somebody performing, a complicated surgery on me, I want there to be some sort of oversight. But having some professions having it, I don't necessarily agree with that. Every single profession, I should say. So, yeah, that's what I'm passionate about, and that's why I do what I do.
And so you're basically getting involved when somebody gets a notice from their board or their whoever's overseeing their licensure that they've done allegedly something wrong.
Yeah. So exactly right. So their board or like in insurance commission, if it's a state-run agency, real estate commission, something like that. Also on the administrative side, I've done some daycare ones. It would be a daycare worker that is accused of something. They'll get put on a child maltreatment registry.
Mm-hmm.
Have been able to help and assist on some of those cases. With the industrial commission, if you got 3 or more employees, workers' comp coverage kicks in. You got to have workers' comp. And some people, they just want to run a business. They're not business savvy. They don't know this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the mistakes they made when they're opening a business, they didn't go to an attorney first.
Right.
So they didn't know that, I didn't know I needed workers' comp. Well, it doesn't matter. So they're facing, I think my last client was facing like 17 grand in fines. I can get that down a lot, drop that a lot. So I'm able to help my client out, keep their business afloat. And so I like that sort of stuff where I'm able to help small business owners.
And that sort of thing, it's just a lack of education. They either didn't know they needed workers' comp, or maybe there's an error with the insurance commission or the workers' comp industrial commission. They think there's more employees than there really are, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's I will give the industrial commission credit. I have not really seen them make a complete mistake. They're pretty on top of that stuff. And what they do is they take access to North Carolina Department of Revenue records for employment records, and so they're pretty on top of stuff. On the employer side, it is most of the time it is lack of understanding and a lack of information that they have. I will say I have an insurance friend of mine. And he did advise a business owner, look, you got 4 employees, you need workers' comp coverage, and I can help you out with that. And she just flat out, oh, I'll take my chances with the industrial commission. It's like, all right.
Yeah.
You're going to find
Isn't
out.
that like a daily or monthly penalty? Like it just sort of continues to accrue the longer you go?
It does, yeah. It's up to 3 years. They just changed it in 2019. It used to be like no cap because it could be like 10, 15 years. But now they put the cap at 3 years. It's at least $20 a day, $50 per employee. So it can rack up pretty quick. I had one years ago. It was 27,000, and that was before the 3-year max on it. So yeah, I mean, you play with fire and you get burned eventually. I mean, the industrial commission's got a lot of cases, but they'll catch up to them, and they have been catching up to them. It's just kind of slow process sometimes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So obviously, a lot of industries and professional practices like, doctors, dentists, some lawyers, of course, were significantly impacted by COVID and the ability to operate or not. Are you seeing any significant changes since COVID? Any increase in issues with regulatory boards or anything like that? What's changed as far as your practice is concerned?
I haven't really seen anything different yet with the types of complaints or anything. I would anticipate that it would be profession specific. Some of it might be lack of communication. Some of it, I think you're going to see a high volume of, unfortunately, substance abuse issues and complaints. Either they're self-complaints or they're complaints stemming from substance abuse issues. On the health provider side, you may see some maybe some HIPAA violations if people are doing telehealth, telemedicine, and not doing it correctly. You might see some stuff like that too. I've been I've done a lot of blog posts and some videos on telehealth, telemedicine, and one of the things that I've kind of noticed from reading over the statutes, speaking with people, is just make sure that you're completely HIPAA compliant, because that'll really impact you if you're not. So that was one of the things. But as far as my practice on changes, it's still doing no in-person consultations. In my opinion, there's no reason right now for me not to do to do any sort of in-person. I mean, I can easily do Zoom like anybody else. I can do telephone, and so there's really no reason to take that risk. Even if both people are wearing a mask, why bother? I can do everything I need to do this way. So.
Sure. Yeah. And we're seeing the same thing. We have kept open flexibility. We've had probably a dozen in-person meetings in the last month or so, but it's always been face masks and that kind of thing, which is always less personal, right? It's less, there's less connection and that sort of thing. But some people feel the same way about video. And so even though it's a masked meeting, it's still better in person. So, we're sort of flexible. We give the client the choice, and if they want to, meet with a mask on, we can do that. But now, a lot of people who we work with or who would pay attention to this podcast or see this episode are probably lawyers, financial advisors, CPAs, bankers, all subject to licensure, all subject to oversight. So, if you could, are there some general issues that you see kind of across the board that are kind of, the same or similar for each profession that you're sort of seeing as far as oversight or regulatory issues with your clients?
Yeah, I would say probably the two main things that are the same across the board, and like when you're alluding to, every profession is going to be a little bit different, but things that are pretty common, it would be lack of communication with clients, or if there's another side, lack of communication with them, just not being involved in your case or with your patients or clients is going to be probably pretty big across the board. And substance abuse issues, again, that's going to be pretty substantial across the board, regardless of profession, unfortunately, but that is going to be true. The other one would be if there is a profession with involving trust accounts. Attorneys are big ones. Real estate brokers. They run a trust account too. General contractors. They have a lot of money that runs through them. Anything involving money. And if you're missing, you're missing $100, $200, you're going to get nicked, and it's probably going to be pretty substantial. So that's another thing to keep an eye out on.
Got it. So I know the lack of communication is probably the number one bar complaint for lawyers. Is that a pretty significant issue for other professions too?
Yeah, it does. And I think it boils down to, people that feel like, oh, well, I'll get back to it. It's not major. I'm chasing the next dollar. And then next thing they know, 2 months go by and they didn't answer the simplest question, which has now turned into a big thing. Or if they just took the 5 minutes to send, a quick email, answer the question, it wouldn't have kind of snowballed into something a lot bigger 2 months later. Yeah. And I get it, man. I mean, I'm in the same boat with everybody else. Like you get a ding on your phone and you're in the middle of doing something. It's frustrating, but at the end of the day, your calendar is your best friend. So, and I think that really plays a big part into, keep from getting any sort of complaint, is keep a good calendar so you can say, all right, well, I'm not looking at an email between 1 and 5 today. All right. But once 5 o'clock hits and you've wrapped up doing what you're doing, look at your email from 5 to 5:30, 5 to 6 or whatever, or look at it later in the night when you put the kids to bed or whatever the case may be, so you're not missing anything.
Yep. Yeah. And that's exactly it. Is if you don't carve out the time for it, it's really easy to kick it down the road. That's good to know though. So obviously as a lawyer, you probably get referrals from professionals or from, past clients. Who are the, I guess, top, centers of influence in your professional world that would, be, mutually beneficial for your clients? Who's referring you business? Who are you referring business to as far as types of professionals?
Yeah, I like networking with real estate attorneys. They, I like being in the courtroom a fair bit. Typically, they'll just do closing, so those are usually a pretty good fit for me. Workers' compensation attorneys, because they'll get calls about, will you guys handle stuff with the industrial commissioner? Like, not unless you're hurt. So
Right.
they'll send me stuff too, and then weirdly, so other attorneys that do similar things that I do. It might be overflow, or there's something they can't handle or they don't want to handle. I'll at least take a look into it, and if it's a good fit, then help somebody out that way. But those seem to be the most for me. The other ones would be those that are in a professional, helping out whatever professional in capacity. For example, somebody that might be in a medical provider management services firm, something like that. Yeah, because they're kind of a one-stop shop for medical professionals, like
consulting services and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, kind of coaching services, consulting services. Yeah, things like that. Those are good, really good ones for me.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. Now we'll pivot to what we call the hot seat segment of the interview, where we just ask just a few questions to learn a little bit more about you. First is going to be, what is a show that you're currently obsessed with?
Well, I have been, nothing really current anymore, man. I actually kind of went back to watching old Cheers episodes on Netflix.
Right on.
And I've just kind of been reading a little bit more, started a book called Dark Alliance by Gary Webb, which has been pretty interesting.
Yeah, we've done the same thing, but with Parks and Recreation.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's a show that doesn't even exist anymore, but for Netflix. But it's good to kind of, it's been such a weighty spring as far as all the things that are going on. So sometimes, paying attention to the news and whatnot is just really emotionally draining.
Yeah.
And so it's I guess calming to kind of circle the wagons and come back to something that's familiar. For us, it's, it used to be The Office. It's been Parks and Recreation. It's been old, comedy movies, that kind of thing. But no, I definitely appreciate, coming back to the classics and the comfortable shows that you're used to. If you had a few hours to yourself on any given weekend, where would we find you and what would you be doing?
Outside, probably at Umstead. But if I wasn't in Umstead, I'd probably be in the mountains on a trail somewhere, or traveling somewhere.
Hiking it up?
Yeah. And when sports are back up, I'd definitely be at some sporting event too.
Obviously, Seminoles fan.
Yeah, Seminoles fan. My wife's a big Tar Heel fan, so I go to some of those games here and there.
Does she force you to wear the Carolina blue?
I have a specific shirt that I just coincidentally had in my closet that's got a Carolina blue on it, but I can't wear anything with Carolina on or anything like that. So.
That's hilarious. What's the one book that you recommend the most?
I would say for business wise, Profit First really helped extremely, man. I don't think I would have been able to make it through this without Profit First.
Yeah.
It really, like, just being able to divvy up your income like that, and then be able to cut your expenditures and realize I don't really need this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a lifesaver, man. I really appreciated that. I say leisurely, I liked Art of Power. It's Thomas Jefferson biography, won a Pulitzer, and that was very good. I've always been liked some of Jefferson's philosophy, so that one was a really good read too.
That's awesome. Yeah, Profit First is probably one of the best business books that's ever been written, but the one that I always come back to is Traction. I find myself reading that one probably two times a year.
Okay. I'm gonna write that down.
Foundational. It's like an entire system, entrepreneur's operating system, but it basically is just making you kind of think through, strategic planning and organizational structures and that kind of thing. So I usually try to read that one towards the end of the year to sort of set the framework for the beginning of the year. In conjunction with, setting the calendar and that kind of thing, but great book. What are your favorite 3 podcasts currently?
History Unplugged. I really enjoy that one. I've been listening to Joe Rogan Experience a fair bit. Yep. And then I've been listening to David Nagel's Successful Mind podcast. Easy for me to say. And that's I'm sure you're aware of that, but yeah, that's the business mindset podcast. And he
does a daily podcast, which is impressive. That much content coming out every day.
Yeah.
David Nagel is probably one of my favorite people right now. I think everything that he's done probably over the 6 months I've participated in. It's been great. All of his paid programming and stuff like that on entrepreneur mindset and that kind of thing. I mean, he's genius. Yeah. But Joe Rogan's been in my rotation probably for the last 5 or 6 years. I don't agree with everything that he says and all of his podcast guests, but you never know what you're going to see on that show. Like you can pull it up one day and it's like a professional ultra marathoner, and the next it's Killer Mike, and the next after that it's a comedian, and it's always varied perspectives, and somehow he's always able to weave in and out of conversations. And I just saw the other day that he just licensed the podcast to Spotify for $100 million. I was like, geez, man. Kind of take it for granted how lucrative podcasting can be, right?
Yeah.
And so where can we find you online?
So I got a website, www.northstatelawfirm.com. And then I'm on social media. Haven't made it to TikTok yet. I don't think we're going to make it.
Snapchat and TikTok are the social that I refuse to join.
Yeah, I'm a little bit too old for both of those, man. I missed the cutoff point for that. But I'm on the other ones, the Instagram, or Insta as the kids say, and all the other ones. So
awesome. Well, Nick, it was great to have you on the podcast. Glad we could have you for the interview. Looking forward to working with you in the future, and appreciate you taking time out of your morning.
Hey, thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. And you have a great one, bud.
Absolutely. Thanks again for listening to the Plan Well Podcast, episode 7, and look out for another episode next week. It's Paul from Cary Estate Planning.
That's it for this week's episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. We'll see you all next time.